Winograd. Typically you can have one crash course, and an hour, I think this was like 3 or 4 crash courses. Thank you so much. Lots of thought-provoking insights and ideas. And now I'd like to open the floor for discussion. I'll just ask you please to mention your name and institution, and please keep your comments and questions short. Thank you. Please.
My name is Hashim Zambarawi from Ecole Security. I was very much intrigued by the sandwich syndrome. And the way we're thinking, basically in the Middle East, is that we move towards more of a service-oriented country, i.e. Accounting, call centers. Yet, in Wave 2, what we're faced with is that everything is becoming digitized, and these are becoming obsolete, even in the West. So, I don't know, where do you think we should go? I mean, resources, we're low on resources, we're challenged with education, and even when we're looking at service, that's something that is within 10 years is going to be dying.
Thank you. Perhaps we can collect maybe a few questions first.
Hi, my name is Selena Badruddin, and I work at the Access Launch for Development Center here at the Business School. I had a question about looking through all these indicators like religion, security, agriculture, like culture in general. I think these variables can be explained through behavioral economics and can actually predict a certain behavior in the short run, at least in the next 10 years, for example, given technological growth and advancement. And in this way, can governance actually catch up on what's happening through behavioral economics, or is it too optimistic?
Well, Fernando Zaraquera, Ambassador of Chile. First of all, I would like to congratulate Mr. Carlos. Your family name?
Willard.
Very difficult to pronounce. Yeah. Congratulations for your remarkable and interesting presentation. First of all, I want to thank you because you mentioned Chile as a good example. In fact, it's not only an economic example, also a political example. We have already 3 decades of strong political stability. But economically speaking, I just want to remember the words of Christine Lagarde. She recently said that Chile, the numbers of Chile are outstanding. Fantastic, she said. and if I smile recently, it's not of proud, it's just an expression of kindness. Second, you are absolutely right. In Latin America, there is no one economic process. There are different processes. The Chilean process is totally different from other countries of the region. But I want to stress the idea that there is a very interesting bloc in Latin America now, that is the Pacific Alliance. And my question is, first of all, how do you see this process, integration process of Pacific Alliance toward 2050, and you see the possibility of emerging another economic bloc beside the Pacific Alliance, Mercosur, and even that, if there is a possibility to merge the Pacific Alliance with the Mercosur. That is, I think, a great goal. Thank you very much.
Obviously, the sandwich problem is it's a serious problem, but it's better to have a sandwich than nothing to eat. So I will start with that many times the reality of policy is second best or third best solutions. It's not always the first best. But it's the issue in the current global economy is that you have shocks all the time. So the idea is how to get a society and economy that is the quickest it can to adapt. And the quickest it can, in a nutshell, in my view, is institutions and education. Institution is difficult to construct. Education is long to have. But the sooner you start, the better you construct human capital to defend. And as I said, I think before, or I don't know if I did it here or with this interview they did, is that the less expropriable capital that human beings have is the one they can take with them, which is knowledge. So I would say that there is no easy solution, and there is a combination of public policies that go beyond education, logistics, infrastructure, ports. All this make a compound of productivity. So it's not one solution. But if you tell me choose one for the long term, I will choose the old thing of the Illuminists, which is education and aptitudes. Education may be rethought in terms of practical abilities in different ways. I'm no expert in education, but systematic increase in human capital. But the problem is that takes time. And the political process is short, and people need to be elected. So the issue is how to combine the dynamics of, if we want to construct democratic society with the electoral process as a reality, with long-term objectives. And that's a big challenge that leads to some forms of institution building, consensus, and long-term state issues that may be shared in a society. I don't know if I answer your question, but for the time being, if you have a sandwich, use it. But be careful, because it may disappear.
Not if you're the cheese.
Huh?
Not if you're the cheese.
Well, it's better to eat cheese. Well, I have a bit of cholesterol, so they told me to eat less cheese, certain cheese, and you know, in France it's difficult when they tell you to eat less cheese. So, but I have to adapt. And better to have cheese than nothing. So, but you need to move forward. Go from cheese to nouvelle cuisine. But first get the cheese. There are a lot of people that don't have even cheese.
I meant metaphorically being squeezed in the
I also meant that. Or do it just offhand.
Maybe.
So there were other questions about also behavioral aspects. And,
Well, then the governance catch up. Well, it's. I believe strongly in analytics but political processes and governance are very complex things. At a certain period of my life, I had the privilege to work with Michel Rocard, that was Prime Minister of France, somebody I admire. Obviously, he took me as the techie boy that had to do the calculations and all these things. But I traveled with him and I had this experience of a lot of discussion about politics, and he said, you know, Carlos, we are very rational people and we try to think in orderly boxes, but politics is analytics and a lot of emotions. Do not neglect emotions. These days, you see that the role of emotions, and in this part of the world, I have the feeling that also many times emotions frustrate our analytics. So use it, but don't overstate it. Don't go without it, but don't think that if you have the good program, it's a sufficient condition.
Thank you. A second and final round of questions.
Chile, there was a.
Oh, sorry.
No, we have to be, you know, I'm Argentinian, so we have to preserve.
And Chile already featured heavily in
Yeah, and I gave, for an Argentine, the ambassador should be, I gave a lot of compliments to Chile, no? You didn't complain. No, it's true. I will never overstate the robustness, because I've seen a lot of successful people derailed in history. So I would never take comfort, as I said, of success that will decay. I will be always alert and ready. But from a macro point of view, I think effectively Chile has a very, and that's an interesting learning when we talk about governance. They constructed an interesting governance for Latin America. Typically is aside from Scandinavia and the autocratic countries of the Gulf, is one of the only countries that manufacture stabilization fund out of the copper resources, which is volatile, that amounts to about 10% of GDP, and that gives like an insurance. Why is this interesting in governance? Because the extreme case is Norway. They make a referendum to redistribute a bit of their enormous fund for the days they will not have oil, and the people voted against. Only in Norway this can happen. You do that in Argentina, and everybody says give it all. That's why you can never construct it. So there is something to learn, difficult to reproduce, how a Latin American society managed to have a consensus to save and buy an insurance in the good days when there's a society with extremely high inequality levels and a lot of demands unsatisfied. So it's a big challenge for the political process. In terms of the Pacific, well, the absence of the U.S. in the Pacific story these days, or the attitude of the U.S. as in other trade, there is a big fight today in the heads of the leaderships of this world in terms of multilateralism or unilateralism. And I think that the Pacific agreement has to be pushed, but it is a big handicap not having the
Pacific
US
Alliance.
The Pacific Alliance. The Pacific Alliance has to be pushed because it's just a big option value. Very simple. It's like a sandwich. It's much better to go this direction and be ready for the opportunity than to wait. In the same sense, I could talk about the Mercosur European Union agreement. It's not perfect, but it's better to have it to take advantage of. But I think that the combination of Pacific Alliance with Mercosur will be mutually beneficial. For the Pacific Alliance, because it will increase the distribution of portfolio opportunities. Actually, I have to remind, and I did work because I was when I was in government many years ago, I was in charge of the Mercosur negotiation, and in those days Chile was coming very often as an observer, and we were working. Then the Mercosur derailed, and the Pacific people went their way. I think that today is a good time because of the political situation in the region to recombine. And also, it helps the Mercosur to go to a more open stand negotiating with the countries of the Pacific Alliance. So I think there's a mutual benefit, and to have an agreement with the Mercosur, 250 million people that are just a front door, is fundamental. So, but fundamental is a big win for the Pacific Alliance.
Thank you, Jamal.
My name is Jamal Ibrahim Haider, and I'm a member of the Economics Department at AUC. Thank you very much, Professor Winograd, for the presentation. It was really a kind of helicopter view on the region, and I really appreciate it. For me, I was also trying to see some kind of similarities between Latin America, LAC, and MENA, our region, the Middle East and North Africa. And until now, I find it a little bit challenging, actually, to take any region in the world and to think about it as one country or one economy. I find it would be more interesting and more stimulating if we could take each of the countries separately, because they're really different. You think about Africa, Middle East, North Africa, etc. So I found three similarities, actually. One is about the real importance of economic complexity discussion, what kind of products these economies need to shift to if they talk about export diversification, and that would depend probably on their strategies, whether they want more jobs or quality jobs or so. And also another similarity between your region and our region is the institutions. The need really for different kinds of institutions and different kind of social contract. And the third one, the serious need for a discussion for the growth without development. In both regions we have a lot of growth, but we still do not have development in terms of various dimensions. And one question I'm also now trying to, that's now actually triggering part of my research, is why some countries, like Chile, for example, today, which was mentioned, and use it just an example, although I do not know much about Chile apart from that my former roommate was from Chile. And why did the Chile platform that good why, for example, other countries in the region didn't perform that well. What can Chile teach, or what can other countries learn from Chile? For us, also here, Tunisia performed better than Jordan and then Morocco and Lebanon, than Egypt. Why? So for me, this question by itself is if you can pin down at least one causal driver for this better performance, I think I would be very happy when I go home and I could tell my students and my people about what was really special in this case, and what I can take from it.
Thank you. Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you for the very good explanation. My name is Willard, I'm the author of Guatemala. And even though your presentation is basically based on economic figures from South America, but I come from a little bit north to that region. But I don't have a question. I just have some remarks that for me, there are some interesting, well, many interesting things, but there are some points there. For example, about the these problems or this instability about the social integration with native groups and European groups. As you show very clearly there, Mexico, Guatemala, Peru, Bolivia, and Ecuador basically present this kind of disturbances. And those countries are precisely the base of the former, the most developed native groups in Latin America, Aztecs, Mayas, and Incas. And in the other countries, you don't see this problem simply because the native population was destroyed or they couldn't survive to these 500 years. But our groups, because of the richness and the development they achieved in the past, so they got there let's say, the means to survive through these 500 years. On the other hand, second point, having water. We have lots of water, but it sometimes also brings you problems, especially when you are the producer of the water. That's the case of Guatemala with our neighbors. Because even though you produce the water, but it goes to neighboring countries. And you cannot do with your water whatever you want. You have to keep it clean, and you have to keep it in many, many ways. And also about this rainy forest, tropical forest, I understand that many of these have been destroyed. In Guatemala is the case. Not too long ago, National Geographic announced that beneath the tropical forest of Guatemala in the north, the Petén forest, there are thousands and thousands they discovered through special kind of photography of Mayan ruins. But if the world wants to see them, the world will have to stop breathing, because that region in Guatemala produces 10% of the oxygen of the world. So definitely we cannot destroy the jungle, because it is such a small, such a huge production of oxygen for such a small country like Guatemala. 10% of the oxygen is being produced there. About, for example, the being victims, as we are, from the destruction of the environment. Of course, we have helped also to destroy the environment, but not in such a way as we are suffering from this. Because the main polluters in the world are China, India, the United States, and the industrialized countries, and we are getting the results from that. Guatemala is in the list of the 10 most damaged countries because of these climate changes. So sometimes the quota of destruction that you have been putting on the table is not in accordance with the damages you are getting back. About these changes in religion, we continue being basically a Christian country. When I was a kid, 95% of us were Catholics. Now we are only 55% of Catholics. The rest we have some 40% more or less of these neo-Pentecostal evangelicals. And it is not a problem when you go to the religious aspect. But it comes to be a problem when these religious aspects start to create situations within the political world. And not too long ago, just a few months ago, Guatemala was making some things that were not well seen in the national arena, and this situation, these changes in religion are responsible in a huge part for that. Because these people are behind many of these situations. So I'm mentioning this because when you analyze and you start to ask here, this, and this, so at the end you have some things. About, for example, the production. Okay, we are the future plan for food and for this kind of things. When you are not good anymore in some things, you have to change. Many years ago, Guatemala was participating in the world market of cotton, and we were doing very well. But with all these fabrics and things that are coming every day, we started to see that it was not a good product anymore to be involved in the market. So we cut completely. And what happened as a result of that? That the land we were using to produce cotton, now we use those lands to produce sugarcane. And from being the 9th, the 10th sugar producer in Latin America, today only Brazil produces more sugar than Guatemala in Latin America, and we are the 5th in the world. And just by using the lands we were using for cotton, now we use them for sugarcane. So it's a matter of, okay, open your eyes and see what you do.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Ambassador.
Yeah.
Can we please
Yes, fine point. And for example, you said that for Mexico, China is a competitor. But if you try to accommodate your condition to the other ones, for example, we are back to back with Thailand. And many years ago, in Guatemala, there were some fruits that are from this part of the region, Thailand, Vietnam, but we have more or less the same conditions. Now we are not only producing, but exporting them. So it's just a matter of trying to accommodate in these changes. Thanks.
Thank you. Would you like
Okay.
to go ahead? Sorry, can we just one final question from?
Sorry.
Very specific, I know that we're limited of time. You said, and I cannot agree more, that poverty and inequality are historical problems in Latin America. But the problem is that several countries of the region have developed several and different strategies, populist and liberal. And however, after 100 or more years, we still have dealing with the same problem, probably with the exception of Chile. That inequality is there, poverty is there, maybe with level rates of poverty, but in any case, both are the main problems of the region, or most of the most relevant problems in the region. In light of that, it seems that the region is condemned to be repeating in an endless way the stop and go strategy all the time. Look what is happening in Mexico now. The future government is looking Paris, as you said, as a very attractive option. Again, something that we implemented in the middle of the 70s and in the 80s. And we are trying to replicate, apparently, the same story. So, and Chile, of course, is a very interesting reference for us, but the size of the population, of the Chilean population is different to countries like Brazil and Mexico. So, do you think that it's possible at the end of the day to forge a new political consensus in order to deal with the challenges that the region historically faces, talking about poverty and inequality? Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Winograd, the floor is yours. And I just ask that we finish and wrap up the next 5 minutes if possible.
The helicopter was mentioned. This is, there is a story that economists know about Milton Friedman and the helicopter throwing money. This is, I hope this is not what people expect at the end of my And I thank first my colleague from some time from Paris that I didn't know we exported here, but it was an helicopter puissance 5, what you sent me as questions. Economic complexity, institutions, growth without development, why some countries? Well, I'm going to try to take a bit because this is like heavy artillery on everything. Well, I think that on economic complexity we get afterwards. Maybe we can go on this, but I will take two issues. One is that there is a higher economic complexity where that it comes tied with innovation, with an improvement in the conditions of life of the most, and at the same time, this complexity, it's not a level of complexity, but the rate of change. And we have always to see the impact of levels and rates. And the issue that is a big challenge for governance, for consensus, it goes into some of these questions, is that the word economy looks sometimes like a moving target. So you jump there because you run. Some people don't jump, but you jump there because you run, and the target moves to the other side. The ambassador of Guatemala was quoting this. I'll give it as a general feature that the degree of innovation and change in conditions, there are many more actors than before. There are many more actors. There are many more scientists in the world. In 20 years, we are going to discover that out of 1.4 billion Chinese, what is being constructed as the system of technology is not a problem of growth in income and capacity, it's a size problem. If you put India and China moving, the planet is living probably the most profound transformation in its history, because not only of the speed, but the size of the truck. When you remember 30 years ago, a lot of people talked about the one-time poor Europeans given the potato Irish. And they discovered that the Irish became tigers. But they were 3 potatoes. They wouldn't impact. Now we are talking about 40% of the world population is moving. So all the stories we are telling here is marked by this transformation in the planet dynamics. So complexity, yes, but the issue is that not only there is complexity, but a big rate of change. And that goes to the question of the sandwich, goes to the question of the cotton, and goes somehow to a fundamental question of the ambassador. Institutions. Institution is today a well-gained frontier fashion in intellectual. The issue is that we know that institutions count. When we have a very hard time, even the people that vote for Nobel Prize like Daron Acemoglu and Jim Robinson that I know and I appreciate, but we don't know very well how to do it. We know it has a tremendous effect, but the causality and the production function of institution is extremely unclear. We get different models. People go nuts. Yesterday I was discussing with a very interesting fonctionnaire of the Egyptian government, and he was saying about the autocratic Singapore way. Was the Singapore ambassador yesterday, and I said, well, listen, there are many different solutions. Anxiety is not necessarily a good advisor. Singapore came from a Ghana level of income to become one of the richest economies with a fragmented society, Chinese, Malays, with no history, and they constructed in this island a common ground, but also the Scandinavians, threatened by the world and through crisis, constructed an ethos and constructed a democratic model of development. And also the Costa Ricans that are neighbors to the ambassador, in the middle of very difficult times, even in the times of dictatorship, they constructed a national consensus, a small country, with not an enormous amount of resources and an interesting model. So there is diversity in terms of institutional development. I think there is a lot to learn, and it's a lack of maybe it's presumptuous, of intelligence not to look at world experiences, but it is an excessive presumption to try to copy experiences, neglecting the national history. So, true institutions of growth without development. Well, growth seems to be, well, we have Bhutan, that has the satisfaction index. It's a very happy country with not a high degree of development that shows that, that there you go to these ideas of well-being. But in general, we can say, even with all the tolerance for diversity of opinions, that growth seems to be a good input for development. And it's true, you can redistribute better, you can use it better, and you have countries that have a growth out of a bout of a favorable time and don't use it well. For instance, we have periods in Latin America where a commodities boom was not used the same way in Chile, Peru, Colombia, Bolivia, that had a very good performance during the commodity boom, and Argentina, or the extreme case of decomposition in economic and social life that Venezuela is living today, whatever you think, just going by the indicators. And all went through a commodity boom. So you see this in Africa, in different places in the world. Or even what I called before, how the Norwegians manufactured. They were the poor Scandinavians, and today they are the emirs of Scandinavia, but are saving for the future generations. So institutions count, governance counts. Why some countries? Well, it goes to the same questions. You call the case of Chile. I think that you have to track to history, but also I will recall the case of Peru and Bolivia recently. I would say that if you look from outside, you're a Martian, and you land in Latin America, Chile would be an easier country compared to Bolivia and Peru, originally. I went to Peru and I was in hospital in Peru, and there I learned, believed myself I was a true Latin American until I had dysentery in Peru, and I was 1 week in a hospital, a public hospital, and I discovered that the people talked to me in Quechua, and I said, I'm a Latin American, and they say, gringo, help the gringo, they say to the nurses. And I was with my poncho, long hair and beard, trying to be, and I started to learn Quechua, 3 words, trying to get close. And I discovered that the fragmentation was very strong. To see what happened in the last 25 years, with a lot of problems in a country like Peru, is maybe even more challenging than the smooth development of Chile compared to others. So in Peru, that has a strong polarization that was mentioned somehow by the ambassador of Guatemala, for the last 25 years has been growing regularly and has maintained democracy, but every single president in the last 25 years has to finish either in court with corruption, with less than 10% approval rate in the polls, and comes a new one, but by a miracle, I would say, I'm not a believer, but for some reason, the course is somehow maintained. But there is not one that is home without problems. And Peru has a long way to go, but if inequality is still high, poverty has fallen by half. Peru today has 15% poverty rates. So Chile 25 years ago, that it's not only Chile that you have to look. Chile had about over 30% 25 years ago, and today it's even below around 10. So at the same time, I connect this with the ambassador comment, the problems are not exactly the same. Things have changed. We've seen the demographics of Brazil. Brazil is 200 million people. Social habits have changed in 25 years. That means the society is not the same. If you look at the structure of society in the country of Brazil, we didn't talk enough of Brazil. Brazil is the biggest population in the area, and it's a driver of the area that has very soon elections that are extremely interesting because of the uncertainty of what can happen. Brazil was an extremely polarized society. At the beginning of the century, Brazil, of the 20th century, Brazil had more than 60% illiteracy rate. So look at what society, when Argentina had 12. Today, the rates are, Brazil is still a bit higher, but nothing compared. So there are big transformations in place. Inequality levels still are very high in the region all across. Is a secular problem. And some countries even deteriorated. Argentina had almost European levels of inequalities in the 50s, where the Gini coefficient was a bit higher than France today, and today it is in the Latin American mode. So you can go forward and you can go backwards too. But at the same time, Brazil, Peru, and Chile transform its society. If you look at middle, lower, and higher classes, the creation of a bigger middle class is a novelty for a lot of this country. It's an old social trait of the Southern Cone. I didn't talk about Uruguay, which is a country that has a social contract that is extremely interesting, where you have the alternance between a left and a right that have a sound management of the economy. Same type of situation of what we call the consensus of Chile. Uruguay has the levels of equality through all these years have been maintained low. They have the lowest levels of inequality. It's a very interesting society to study. It's like the same stock of people as Argentina and a completely different political culture. This is very interesting because it's like an experiment in real life. Economics and, well, Guatemala, that was, you did in much less time than me a presentation, so I appreciate it. I will take one point here, or a couple of points in what you say, instability and social integration. Your neighbors and the rest of the world. You could reasonably say, hey, listen guys, we have a trade-off. I understand very well your problem, but the preferences of my population, my border, is to reduce poverty and put agriculture in this forest. So maybe we will have to have a deal. You will have to transfer to me part of your well-being to buy part of my concession of not exploiting the forest. So it presents problems of governance. If I'm doing this for the world, but in exchange of that, I'm not doing something that my voters want, there is an issue there that should be, it's not only the one direction analysis. About this problem of religion and politics, I think that MENA probably has a lot to teach us, and I don't know if we are not in the best place to think about the intertwining of religion and politics in terms of the evangelist upswing. It happens, I think this is an import of American culture, where the evangelist movement always had, remember that also the Protestant movement, Martin Luther King was a pastor, and in the tradition of the US, some of the pastors got involved in politics strongly. It's also true that the Catholic Church, we have some examples, maybe they didn't run for president, but they affected very closely the political processes in many of these countries for centuries. But I think that this is partly an import because the evangelist movement is very much driven by the American tradition. And the US politics also has a bit, you know, in the Republican Party exists what is now called the Christian coalition that has an enormous weight, cannot make a candidate still, but can affect the decision of a candidate. So I think it opens a big room for where should be religion, and it goes to the Illuminists, which should be in-house or should be in the public arena.
Thank you. Once again, this is the start of a new seminar series, the Willard Brown seminar series, and please expect invitations for future events that will take different formats in the form of public lectures and roundtable discussions. And again, we're very fortunate to have Professor Winograd for us to launch the series, so please join me in thanking him once more.
Thanks to all of you. You gave me a lot of work. I have to go work.